my pleasure to be here tonight, and thank you all for joining us. I know getting on our screens on the return of, it seems like a spring, at least in Toronto, is difficult, but I really appreciate you joining us. And of course, this session will be recorded and it will be shared on our platforms for future engagement. So what I have planned is I've prepared a slide presentation with um, with some images of the exhibition. For those of you who haven't seen the exhibition in person, you can get a sense of it. And I also would urge you to, if you can't go to Toronto and see the exhibit in person, I would urge you to look at our website through gallery virtual.ca to see the virtual tour of the exhibition. You can actually scroll through it and navigate the gallery, which is quite an experience. And you're able to see the didactics, the labels for each piece. And it's very thorough. So that's certainly something that I would encourage everyone to look through. But I've prepared some images with images directly from the gallery, so you can get an idea of the space and what we're looking at and what I'll be discussing. So our current exhibition is Tracing Labor Territories, and it's co-curated with my colleague, Maritza Rosales Argonza, who is a curator based in Montreal. And what we were trying to do for this exhibition was to invite artists that politicize the spaces that lie between territory and labor, and to highlight the imperial and colonial relationship between the North and the South. So we invited 4 artists that explored labor, not only in terms of border relationships, but also that dealt with the exploitation of workers within a neoliberal economy. Let's see if my slides are working. There we go. So as you can see, the exhibition offers a wide range of mediums, including photography, video installation, sculpture, sound. And this is just like a little section of the gallery space. We have Anaí González, Maria Hoyos, Martin Rodriguez, and Victor Vargas part of this exhibition. And they all offer different approaches, different narratives and perspectives about this theme, while also providing an inquisitive and research-based artistic practice where the voice of workers and migrants are now introduced into the gallery space, into the contemporary gallery space of the Canadian imaginary. So I thought I would begin with the first artist that we encounter once we step in the gallery, who is Maria Hoyos. She is an artist originally from Cali, Colombia, and is currently based in Montreal. Maria creates these sort of gestural responses to the sugar industry and its colonial traces, and the impact it has over Latin American and Caribbean workers. Her sculptural installations and gestures and pieces are an attempt on her behalf to kind of subvert coloniality, subvert the neoliberal model, while also transforming the product of sugar into art, into commodity. So sugar is used by the artist as a symbol of coloniality, but it's also an element that bears witness to the systems of domination that persist long after the independence of many Latin American countries. And in this video, which I will show shortly, it's a video animation that is installed on the floor in the gallery space. And it's based on her research on pathology linked to poor working conditions that is responsible for over 20,000 deaths in the past 2 decades. And it is linked to the sugarcane industry. So she does this rendering of a kidney. It's a diseased kidney. It's seen through the depiction of this image. And the image is exposed to liquid, almost with some tints of red, reminiscent of blood. And the sugar, which is what she uses to create this rendering, this image of the kidney, slowly disintegrates. And there is research done by Dr. Daniel Brooks, who investigates the causes of this epidemic of chronic kidney disease in Central America. And he's highlighted environmental factors that affect patients, and that includes heat stress, dehydration, agrochemicals, and that are all found in the sugar industry. So I will share with you part of the video. Yeah, sorry, it's start playing again. So Maria Hoyos also shares with us 2 other pieces. This piece is called Campos Híbridos dos, which means hybrid fields number 2. And it's an artwork where the artist places sugar crystals directly onto the plexiglass and glues them onto the plexiglass. The plexiglass hangs from the ceiling. Not sure if you are able to really see on your screens here exactly what's happening, but it's plexiglass that hangs from the ceiling, parallel to the wall, and there is a space between the wall and the plexiglass, and there's the gap between the artwork and the wall projects a shadow of the image that has been done with the crystals, with the sugar crystals. And this work was created based on historical archival documentation of sugarcane plantations that the artist retrieved from the early 20th century to the present. Here you have a close-up of that image, and you can sort of see the plantation field. In this piece, the artist highlights the forms of exploitation that take place in the industry. She also places a direct spotlight onto the piece. There's a certain angle that has to be that's placed in order to project that shadow that is needed, which is part of the piece itself. And that highlights her intention with that is to highlight the monoculture that destroys the lands, affects the air quality, the well-being of people in the region. And really, it metaphorically speaks to sugar becoming, in a sense, the shadow that haunts the livelihood of people, of communities. And then the final piece that Maria Hoyos shares with us is called La Huelga de Corteros 2008 Cali, which translates to the Strike of Cutters 2008 Cali. And this piece is also made out of sugar, but in this case, the artist has used sugar cubes. The artist recreates the portrait of an archival image she retrieved from the internet, and the image projected looks like a pixelated image of it. The image is of a wounded worker who was assaulted during a protest against the sugarcane industry in Cali, Colombia. And the artwork is also placed on an altarpiece. And the sugar cubes are dyed by hand with various tints of color, almost resembling the color of candy and sweets. The artist here alludes to the enormity of the issue, on how sugar has such a harmful and dark history attached to it, yet it is sugar-coated, as if it were benign. So the fact that we can't distinguish the image from up close, and we have to step back in order to understand its complexity, and the image itself, refers to that sort of sense of magnitude, of enormity, of its historical, of its political, social, and economic scale, and how it affects at an individual scale, and those individuals are forgotten with the passing of time. And then I wanted to shift your gaze to the section where Martin Rodriguez's work is. He has an installation that he shares with us. This is an installation that has been shown in different locations and has different iterations to it, different elements that he includes. And in this case, he's included the element of the antenna, the sculpture, and the video. So Martin is an artist who grew up in the border between Mexico and the US in Arizona. He has also openly shared that he is a cancer survivor. And this became a transformative event for him, where that influenced his artistic practice. So about a few years after his surgery, he began to feel the need to reconnect with his roots and decided to go on a journey of rediscovery. And he traveled to the border to begin this project, to the region, the area where he grew up. So during that process, he found that his identity was heavily entangled to his approach to art making. His obsession with sound and radio is linked to his search as well to identity and to health. The artist, as do all of the other artists in the exhibition, take on a research-based approach to his artistic practice. And the work shown at the gallery is based on the knowledge he gathered and the transmissions through the radio antennas that he recollected. So the work we have on display that I'm speaking of is called, is entitled In Search of Aztlan. And as I mentioned, it's installation and intervention-based work in which the artist shows us this video. This is a still of part of the video. And part of the images that we see in the video, and of course, we're not going to see through the whole thing, but part of that are streets and the neighborhoods he would drive through as a child growing up in Arizona, while also showing the problematic nature of the U.S. Mexico border. He also incorporates in some sections of the video quotes by Chicana feminist and queer cultural theorist Gloria Anzaldúa, of course, questioning this idea of being Chicana and what it means to be Chicana. And in his case, he identified with the term Chicanx, and how the border becomes the site of conflict is also important because they are recordings that he captures through the radio antenna. That is also, the radio antenna is part of the installation, and it's placed on site at the border, which is presented at the gallery space, and you will shortly see that. But I did want to show you a little bit of the video, just so you have a sense of what it's like.
Cambiamos otra vez antes de irnos. Ya únicamente nos separan 15 minutos de las 10 de la mañana. Tenemos muchos saludos, tenemos un muy buen cargamento. Enviando también saludos para mi amigazo, el velador por ahí del abuelo. Le enviamos un saludo que se encuentra ya saliendo a su casita. Vamos a enviarle una cancioncita que solicitó también con mucho gusto. Saludos para la señora Carla de Las Vegas, Nevada, que nos habló para felicitar a Carlitos Emanuel Chacón, que está cumpliendo 14 años. La señora María Jesús por allá en Arizona, a la familia Lara Hernández, al señor Barbosa, que nos escucha por allá en Nuevo Nogales, también le enviamos un saludo. Por ahí a familia Valenzuela, que nos escucha por allá en la Colonia Esperanza, a la gente de la Mesa, a la gente de Lomas de Anza, de Tibuca, de Santana, donde tenemos bastante auditorio también, a la gente bonita de Santa Cruz. Le enviamos un saludo con mucho gusto. Y bueno, 9:45 vamos a escuchar esta canción a cargo de Raúl Abramson, se llama Al cielo le robé una estrella. Le robé una estrella, una rosa tan bella. Yo quiero, he pedido un beso.
So the artist built various radio antennas as mocks, and you can see a little bit of his artist talk on our site as well. He did an artist talk a few weeks ago. But he ends up with this large one that he takes to on site between the border in order to capture the invisible sounds that can be heard and detected through the antenna. And that's the antenna that he brings to the gallery space and shares with us. His question was, how can radio speak to place, especially for someone who grew up along the border and who has the ability and the privilege to move back and forth freely at the border. The artist was interested in thinking about radio transmission with that same ability of radio waves moving back and forth and being able to hop borders without a visa. What is also most prominent in the space is, this large antenna in the middle of the gallery, the antenna is also an oversized ojo de Dios. For those of you who do not know, ojo de Dios, which means God's eye, is a spiritual object, an amulet of sorts, made by weaving a design out of yarn on a wooden cross. And it's commonly used and done by huicholes in Mexico, an indigenous community in Mexico. It is also seen in other communities throughout Latin America, and it's used as a symbol of protection. So the artist shared with us that his father taught him how to make these ojo de dioses, and he decided to build a much larger version, and not only be able to be protected by the unseen, but to be able to hear what we cannot see. And here you have a close-up of it. The antenna was built by the artist to feed the audio recordings we hear in the video. So everything we hear in that little snippet that you saw the video is captured through this antenna that he had put on site between the borders, which are all, radio signals that he captured. And the artist is thinking about all the elements of which we cannot see or hear that affect those at the border. He's studying the radio frequencies to find relationships between people and the supernatural, because ojo de dioses have the power to see the invisible, similar to how the antenna can capture invisible sound waves. What the artist is attempting to understand is our relationship to land, and to history, to ancestors, and to what is not possible to encage. So the radio antenna also serves as a symbol and resonates with his identity search and his own identity search in this attempt to find home and belonging. The artist also mentioned how important it was for him to be useful during his research process when he went to work at the border. He volunteered with Humane Borders, which is an NGO that provided barrels of water for migrant workers who were crossing the border. And at the time of his research, Trump was president. And migrant children were being held in cages at the border. So for the artists, it was also, of course, very problematic. But it was also important for him to approach this research with a sense of purpose and of activism, of solidarity, and not just as an observer and foreigner. So in one of his excursions, they found a site where migrants had stayed and made a fire pit with a circle of rocks, which inspired the artist to replicate this configuration of rocks in the gallery. And the fire pit, of course, is a site where people share stories, and the antenna can capture and transmit those stories. And that's sort of the metaphor, the intention of the artist here. And here we turn our sight to the work of Anaí González. Anaí González shares with us two series at Sur Gallery, a very reduced section of each series, of course, that also deal with migration from the south to the north and this relationship that emerges from that encounter. But what is important first to highlight is her background. Anaí is an artist who grew up in the north of Mexico, on this side of Mexico, just 3 hours from the border with the US. And she came to Canada to pursue a master's degree and found herself in London, Ontario, where there were very few Mexicans or other Latin Americans. And when she spoke to others about her experiences, there was a very little, there wasn't an understanding of what it meant to live at the border. There were few references of what it meant to be Mexican or from Mexico. And so while away and living in Canada, she missed her family, her home, her friends, and resorted to music that her father would listen to, with that sort of search for nostalgic memories. And she started to listen to corridos or música norteña. And for those of you who are not familiar with that kind of music, the lyrics tend to glorify or many of them tend to glorify the undocumented Mexicans who crossed the border for a better life in the United States, and speak of the term mojado, which means wetback. Of course, this is considered a derogatory term that describes a migrant worker who crosses and swims the Rio Grande in order to reach the US. But for Anaí, she didn't find any references of crossing towards Canada. And this lack of reference and understanding of the migrant experience that she was experiencing herself towards Canada was her attempt or response to address that gap. So she introduced this series entitled Congelados, which means frozen in English. And instead of using the term mojados, she made up the term congelados, providing context and an experience particular for the Mexican migrant in a Canadian landscape. So the artist also decides to photograph this series during the evenings, and in particular within spaces of isolation. Of course, this gives it a disturbing and eerie feeling of frozen and absent bodies, unable to move, portrayed with children's clothing. And that, of course, also referencing ties to children who were sent to cages at the border during Trump's administration, or children as workers themselves. And the deep snow here, and the in other pieces of the series, you have empty benches, allude to the harsh reality and isolation many migrants experience and confront, along with the precarity and poverty they face, struggling to keep afloat. And then Anaí also shares with us the piece, or sorry, the series entitled Content Must Be Revised, which is another photo-based series that consists of various scans of assembled collages that highlight various words, brands, and slogans that are both written in Spanish and English, from cutout cardboard boxes found in Latin grocery markets throughout Ontario. And she shared with us that she went to different markets and collected over 200 boxes, which also becomes another installation for another piece that she works on. But here the artist is questioning the value of exportation and importation, who and what is allowed to cross the border freely, what kinds of messages and labels are imported that are then disseminated as true and valuable. The cardboard box becomes a carrier of goods and of messages that are stacked and transported on trains. But the artist confronts these stereotypical messages head on what it means to be Mexican in Canada. And these are collages that she cuts out of the cardboard boxes, places them as a collage, and then scans them and prints them on vinyl. So the visual narratives that the artist identifies in this series really highlights the stereotypical messages on these boxes that are imported to Canada. The packaged goods depicted on the cardboard boxes present a racialized personification of people and of labor, which in turn is exploited and used as commodity. And here this word again, commodity, continues to repeat itself in all of the works. She questions the relationship between the two countries, between Canada and the US, commenting on the power structures that lie between them and the commodities of one at the expense of the labor and conditions of the other. Something just happened. There we go. It's just lagging a little bit. So that was Anais' work. And then we step into a smaller room adjacent to the larger section of the gallery. And this is where I would like to end with Victor Vargas's work. He offers a 9-year project of a research-based investigation and relationship building with seasonal farm workers from Mexico and Central America. What we see here is a room with 3 iterations of the same project with different titles for each. But I've put them, Maritza and I have put them in this room because they speak to each other. They're part of the same project. And again, just want to emphasize how intensely research-based all of these practices are. In Victor's case, it's a 9-year commitment. And what is interesting about this project is not only the work itself, but the process and the long-term relationship that the artist built along the way. The artist was surprised to know that not far away from Montreal, where he was living, there were seasonal workers who picked the fruit and the vegetables that he purchased at the supermarket. So he decided to take his bike and commute there every weekend, meet and visit them and learn about their experiences. The commuting for several months allowed him to gain the trust of the workers, and he eventually became friends with them so much that the artist met with their families and interviewed and photographed, filmed them in both Mexico and Canada, which resulted in a photo series and the video that we see here entitled Memories. And this is just a screenshot. And this is the video that I will share with you. But I just wanted to mention that Memories is really a beautiful, captivating 30-minute video that I would urge you to see in person, that focuses on some of the seasonal workers that the artist met during this time. The video captures the human and social impact they face as they adapt to really emotionally and physically demanding labor. Many of the seasonal laborers are motivated by the economic need they have in their hometowns, but they also have to separate from their families for long periods of time. And the toll on their family relationships and communities is expressed in this video. The isolation, the alienation feeling they have is captured in the images. And the interviews that are done to some of these seasonal workers. Victor really highlights the life experiences, the stories, which are often erased, revealing the complexity and diversity of experiences. For example, one of the workers shared being afraid for his family's welfare while he was in Canada working, because people knew in the town that he was working in Canada and could pay the price for their safety.
En mi vida, el primer recuerdo así que me recuerde, pues, cuando se fue mi papá para allá, para Canadá. Recuerdo que se fue un mes, me dejó así, chico, de como de 8 años. Recuerdo cuando llegó igual, y esos días. La primera vez cuando se fue, pues sí se siente uno triste, porque pues pensábamos que no era nada serio todo eso. Eh, y quién sabe si era verdad, a dónde iba, o eso. Y nos quedamos preocupados, mamá y yo, mis hermanos, porque se fue y nunca nos habló, como no teníamos teléfono, comunicación con él, pues, y no sabíamos nada de él. Y ya cuando llegó, pues sí, sentimos harta alegría. Ya nos empezó a platicar cómo le fue, en qué trabajó, todo eso. Y fue alegría, sí, grande.
Right across from the video, we also have part of the series entitled Retratos de Familia, Family Portraits. Those are digital prints of the workers. We can see the portraits of the workers without their families in Canada on one side, on the left side, and on the right are portraits of the workers with their families in Mexico. And on the sides, we have finally the artist shares postales digitales, which is digital postcards in English. These are on canvas. They're painted with natural vegetable dyes and soil. The artist actually brought soil from Mexico, from the hometowns of the workers, and mixed the vegetable and fruit juices that were grown by the workers themselves in the fields in Quebec, and painted these QR codes directly onto the canvas. And these QR codes have videos and soundtracks of the workers and their activities. There's sound, there's images, there's video. You can find testimonies, memories, news, photographs that depict the workers in their communities. And the artist is constantly changing the material for people to engage with. And for this piece, the artist was inspired by how families kept in contact with one another through social media and other apps that facilitated their communications. Of course, before there were telegrams, letters, postcards, telephone cards, to maintain those relationships alive. And so with this piece, the artist is calling upon us to acknowledge that the soil that is used to bear the fruit we enjoy here is achieved by the labor of these workers who are far away from home and their loved ones. So with that, I will stop sharing, and I'm happy to address any questions you might have. Again, would urge you to see the exhibition in person. It would be our pleasure to have you there. For those of you who don't necessarily live in Toronto, again, there is access to our virtual exhibition on our virtual site. You can navigate the gallery on your own time and on your own terms. So